connection. With that, Angela.
Thank you, Toastmaster Hancock. Before we begin, and I know you're going to all hate this, and I don't care, stand up right now where you are. And I think the reason why you hate it is because we can't see, but everybody stand up. And shake it out. Relax. This is not called dancing. We're shaking it out, but you can dance if you want. Oh, okay. Have a seat. We are going to talk about body language. There are a lot of opportunities we have from our head all the way to our feet to consider when we are considering body language. I would say my least favorite thing about virtual meetings is how we all feel constricted to the little squares. We feel like we have to just live in our little squares. I actually blessed to have a standing desk, and I have to stand when I speak. I recently gave one of our Toastmaster speeches, and somebody's like, "You sat down." And I was like, I know, it's terrible. There's so many reasons why standing is going to help us in our body language. Today, I'm actually going to cover primarily about 4 different areas of your body. First, your head. Next, your eyes and your face, your hands, and your feet. Because yes, your feet are of major importance in the role of body language and speaking. How many of you joined Toastmasters because the thought of standing in front of a room full of people was a little tiny bit, or maybe a huge amount, scary? Raise your hand. Fantastic. That is most of us, except for Judith, apparently. She joined Toastmasters to meet her cute husband. No, that was just a side benefit. Just kidding. But the reason why we joined Toastmasters, because most of us are a little bit afraid of public speaking. It's actually often quoted that the #1 fear is public speaking. Second is death, which means, as you've all heard, people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. Why is that? Have you ever stopped to think about why is that? You're Toastmasters, you probably have stopped to think about it, but I'm going to make sure our new members are clear on why that is. And it begins with your head. When we have fear, it is because we are having a thought. And that thought is causing us to have a feeling. Typically, that thought is a crazy story we're telling ourselves. And sometimes the story is spinning so fast we can't even tell because our engines are revving up and because we're so full of fear that we can't even slow down enough to hear the thought that is happening. But I'm going to encourage you, before the next time you have to give a speech, to practice slowing down your thoughts and using your head as part of your body language of your speech. And the way I want you to do that is to imagine that you've just given your speech and it was fantastic. It went perfect. Okay, if you imagine that right now, what does that feel like in your body? Does that feel like exhilaration? Does that feel like excitement? Does it feel like energy? Have you ever noticed that fear and exhilaration sound really similar and they feel really similar? How about if the next time when you start to feel that fear, instead of labeling it as a fear and letting your brain take off running, that you just go, ah, good job, body. Way to get ready for this big and important event. So if you can, in advance, tell yourself the story, this is going to be amazing. And if that doesn't work, then convince yourself that this is exhilaration and it's your body just getting ready for the next event, because your body can be getting ready to run the Olympic race, or your body could be getting ready to run away from the woolly mammoth. Your brain actually is sending the exact same signal. So the first portion of body language is you're going to use your head and imagine a great scenario and imagine that feeling. When I asked you all to imagine that, almost every single one of you that I could see stood up a little bit taller. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is your face. And your face is really critical in your body language. I love it. You guys all got your posture going on. So with your face, you have several different tools that are at your disposal. The first is your eyes. We can all make eye contact. How many of you have ever watched somebody give a speech and they're constantly looking over here or they're looking at the ceiling? I used to get evaluated and I would get fussed at all the time by my evaluator that I would look up at the ceiling. And it was when I was trying to figure out what I was going to say next. So be intentional about making eye contact with each one of your audience members. Now, if they connect with you and they make eye contact, hold it for a second and form that connection. And be aware, don't get creepy and just be staring at the same person, because then they're going to freak out. Okay, don't stare. Just make eye contact, because what's the point of standing up here and giving a speech? But it's to share information, right? And it's to form the connection. And so if we can make eye contact with people, then we're going to increase that opportunity for connection. The next tool that you have on your face is your smile. If you are frowning the whole time and you are trying to convince yourself, this is fun, I'm doing this, but your face looks like this, then actually, it's true. How many muscles does it take to smile versus how many it takes to frown? Also, none of us are getting any younger. And so when we frown, we got all those lines going on up there. So smile, because smile lines are so much prettier than frown lines up there. So use your smile to your advantage. And also pay attention when you're watching a movie and when people are able to use their face to produce an emotion and to communicate an emotion without even using their words. It's beautiful. The acting was amazing. Well, that's because you can tell on their face. And if you are standing up there feeling scared, maybe look at one person and smile at that one person as you're making eye contact. So we have used our head to get our story straight. We're using our eyes to make eye contact, and we're using our smile. Next, we have our hands. Our hands, we do so many weird things, do we not? We do weird things with our hands. Sometimes we stand with our hands behind our back. Sometimes we stand with them gripped at our side. Sometimes we flail them about. Or you could do like I did many years of my Toastmaster career, and I held them right here so that it was like, I one time was called by a fellow Toastmaster that I got in the T-Rex position and my hands just came up here. I was like, I love my Toastmasters friends. So your hands, think about, especially when you're learning the skill of body language, consider writing a few speeches where you have a natural way to use your hands. And notice how when I only use one hand, it creates more visual interest than if everything is always mirrored. If you're constantly mirroring your motion with your hands, then it gets distracting. But if you can use one to raise your hand, to point this direction, to point at your audience. It's more impactful. And so that's called a unilateral movement. So when you're learning this skill, you have to sometimes like go, what story could I tell that's going to make me need to use my just a little bit of hand movement? Our last area is our feet. Now, how many of you have ever heard of the Wonder Woman pose? Anybody heard of it? Amy Cuddy is amazing. And this is where, when I say there's art and science, the science comes in that if you can stand with your feet shoulder width apart and you put your arms on your hips, I don't recommend you give the speech like this, but this is how you can mentally prep yourself and even prep yourself in advance. One of her recommendations is that you, if you're going to a job interview, you go to the bathroom and stand in the bathroom in a power pose, because this tells your body that you are getting ready for something important. And so you want your feet, you want to think of them as the connection you have to the ground. And this is going to be the grounding effect. And just like they tell brides and grooms, don't lock your knees, you want to keep yourself light on your feet. The other thing you don't want to do is keep yourself so steady on your feet that you just stand in one place the whole entire time. And you don't want to fidget with your feet. I want you to think about the whole portion of body language is really about intention, right? So we've set the intention with our mind. We've set the intention with our eyes for the connection. We've smiled, and our feet are going to be moving with intention. And now when you're first starting Toastmasters, you may be like, that is a lot to keep up with, especially because I'm also supposed to have words coming out of this mouth. And I totally understand. What I would recommend is that you choose one of these areas of your body at a time to practice. So when I say that you're going to move with intention, you actually can think of ways to, when you're telling a story and telling your speech, how interesting did the screen just get by me becoming over here to the side? And then if I tell the story again, I can come to this side. Probably if I would have been really on my game with this speech, I could have started my head over here, and then I can start with my hands over here, and I can land back in the center. What's one of the more advanced techniques that I was coached on was actually allowing yourself to use those moments. So let's say that I came over here and I tell a story. Then when I'm over here, I can reference that story by pointing to that position. So if I tell a story here about when I was a small girl, then I come here and I tell a story about when I was an adult. And as a young girl, I thought this way. And as an older adult, I began to think this way. So it really gives you a cool opportunity to reference something earlier in your speech by pointing to that position. A lot trickier with Zoom and way advanced technique, but just to like kind of get your brain thinking about some of the things that you can do to grow and develop, especially this year, we'll probably end up back in some live environments. So today we've covered the four critical areas of body language. First, we're going to get our head on straight, tell ourselves the right story. We're excited and exhilarated. We're going to smile, and we're going to use our eyes. Our hands, we're going to be very intentional about those. And sometimes, instead of doing two-handed, we might just do a one-handed. And finally, use the grounding of your feet to ground you so that it's easier for you to make an extraordinary connection with your audience. Stop.
Thank you, Angela, for that extraordinary speech. That's the best speech I think I've heard on body language. I really enjoyed it. Our next speaker is Liz Romero, and the title of hers is A Bee, a Toastmaster, and One Journey. This is Lee's first project from the Presentation Mastery Pathway. I believe Liz or Lee, you said this was the icebreaker.
Yes.
So she will be speaking 4 to 6 minutes.